Now, I fell in love with skiing so hard that when I wasn't on the mountain, I spent my time sitting in my parents' basement watching movies of skiers. And I became obsessed with these peaks that were just out of a different world. I mean, they were so big, they were so fierce, they were so steep. And when I was watching all these videos, there was this one individual that just completely seized my attention and my imagination. His name was Doug Coombs. What Doug Coombs specialized in was skiing extremely steep faces in really remote mountains and making first ascents down peaks that had never seen a ski track. The height of his career, he was skiing slopes that were 60 degrees. At that point, the line between flying and skiing is nearly indistinguishable. Now, Doug Coombs came onto the scene in the 90s by winning the first World Extreme Ski Championships in Valdez, Alaska. Everything that we see today in ski movies connects to what he did here. Doug Coombs, without question, became my childhood hero. When I graduated college, I made a discovery that would change the next 5 years of my life. I discovered that Doug Coombs hadn't grown up in the wilderness of Alaska. He grew up 20 miles away from me in Massachusetts. Not only that, but he grew up skiing the same little molehill that I grew up skiing in the Neshoba Valley. And discovering that just blew my mind. What was it about Doug Coombs that made him able to possess such ability? And that question kept me up at night. I just couldn't figure it out. Unfortunately, all the questions I had, I could never ask Doug Coombs himself. Because in 2006, he was killed while trying to save the life of a young protege of his, a 30-year-old guy named Chad Vanderham. They were killed in the French Alps. And when it came to me, his story and the parallels of our lives, I realized that this was a story that I needed to tell. I felt truly chosen by it. Now, whether I could do it or not was a question all its own, but I knew that I was going to try. And I went and spent time with his mother. I went to her and I said, I want to write this book about Doug. And she asked me, well, do you want to tell people about Doug the skier, or do you want to tell people about, and before I could even answer, I said, I want to tell about the man. Because everyone knew about the legend of Doug Coombs, but who was the guy behind the legend? And she said, I'd like that. So at that point, I made a pledge to her that this is going to be a story about Doug Coombs the man, not Doug Coombs the skier. The most important person that I spent time with was his wife. But ultimately, it was Doug Coombs' son that made me realize who this book was for. Because he grew up hearing about his dad, all around him, and had no sense of who he really was for himself. People in Jackson Hole would come to him and say, your dad was such a legend, he was so amazing, do you know who your father was? And the answer was no. So I realized that above all things, this book was for him. And that's who the book is dedicated to. I realized that I couldn't just stop at talking to people and trying to understand his life through conversations over the phone or even in person. I needed to go to these places. I needed to walk in Doug Coombs' shoes. I needed to ski in his ski tracks. And I needed to feel the things that he felt in these mountain towns and why he was drawn there. What was important for him? And hopefully, in doing those things, I could better understand this person that captivated my childhood. So I spent 3 winters in Jackson Hole. I then went to Valdez, Alaska. From Valdez, I went to Chamonix, France, the birthplace of extreme skiing. At the end of it all, after I wrote the book, I realized that what I had learned had nothing to do with skiing. Following the life of Doug Coombs, skiing was the vehicle, but what I really learned was about the power of the human spirit. I learned about seeing possibility in impossible things. And I learned that as humans, we all possess a certain amount of energy. Certain people stoke that energy more than others, and you're able to access them. Now, those lessons, while they were experienced throughout the time that I did those adventures I just showed, they came into great focus on my last stop, which was going to Le Grave, France. And I spent 2 months in the little mountain town where Doug Coombs lived his last days. When my bus rolled into Le Grave, I was rattled. I was so stricken with fear. All the storefronts were shuttered. There was no one in the streets. It was kind of a scary looking day. And I'm literally thinking that I got off at the wrong stop because I didn't speak a word of French, so it could have very well happened. I had to get on the mountain. And I spent a week in my little chalet, terrorized, waking up every day, going to my picture window, which looked directly out to that mountain, with my coffee getting cold in my hand, and basically saying, please let the lift not be running today. Because I do not want to go up there. Yes, it was very terrifying, and every day did pose life and death moments. But I was also taken by the simplicity of living in the mountains. Not only living in the mountains, but living on the mountain. And I also realized that there was a time when I was a kid in a basement, dreaming about peaks like this, and now I was in their grips. Not only that, I was led there by a man who I never thought I would know, and yet I felt I knew better than anyone at this point. So with my book, the hope that I have, the testament that I'm trying to give, is the life of Doug Coombs is a story about the power of the human spirit. It's also about the energy of a human being. Doug Coombs was able to stoke the energy of his life into such a roaring blaze that even when he was gone, I could still find it. And I think that is a lesson that we all need to listen to, because we've all lost people, but they're not gone. If you pour your passion and your energy into trying to find semblances of them in your life, they'll come meet you halfway.
I'd like to present Rob with a little memento to mark this day and his incredible achievement. This is a carabiner. If you don't know what a carabiner is, I will tell you. This safety device is used by mountaineers, rock climbers, ice climbers, mountain rescue guides, and extreme skiers. Used in conjunction with a rope, it connects one man or woman to another as they ascend and descend steep terrain. If one should fall, the other is there to catch that fall. Often, when the pitch is so great, the two men cannot see one another. But the trust is still there. Clipping in comes with great responsibility. When you're in the mountains and you hear this, it says, I've got your back. Their life, their story is literally in your hands. This carabiner actually stole from Rob's apartment early this morning. This carabiner belongs to Doug Coombs. Emily was kind enough to send this to Nantucket for you, Rob. Doug would have had this clipped to his harness, or would have had it clipped to his backpack when he was up in the mountains. Although Rob and Doug never met, their connection is undeniable. As you'll witness in the pages of this book, it is very apparent throughout Rob's journey that they had each other's back.
Huh.